my sermon today is we shall overcome someday. But to me, overcoming someday is not the words that we should be using as a congregation. We should be using we will overcome someday, today. Overcoming someday implies the future is going to be better, but God's work is today's work. It has been 402 years since slavery began in America. Someday has always been the call. The anthem of We Shall Overcome Someday has been the inspirational song for believers. What does the word someday mean? It is defined as one of those days at some point in the future, at a future time, date, or sometime unknown. To a teenager, when you ask them, when are you going to clean your room, and they say, well, someday, you know you just heard, probably never. If I did not post my week's work online by 11:59 tonight, which is when we are required to put it online, my professor's assistant tomorrow would text me and say, Alice, are you sick or something? And then ask when I said, no, I'm just fine. And they said, well, when are you going to post? And if I said, well, someday, you can imagine my grade will go way down, and the respect I may have had just disappeared. To others, someday might be out there as a statement, if you push me just a little, later on, I'll probably get to it. Singing Someday We Will Overcome are beautiful words, and my husband and I belong to the NAACP in Wisconsin, and we sang it a lot, and it brought goosebumps to my arms. But I know that today is the day the Lord has made, and we are to rejoice and be glad. Instead of someday, we need to replace the word someday with the word now. Our faith cannot be lived in a box. We are boldly to live our theology in the public world by doing justice. In the book of Isaiah, we find Isaiah was a man with a mission. When faced with opposition, he continued to stand for the truth. Isaiah shared the Spirit of the Lord was upon his people. And in the synagogue, Jesus brought the good news to the poor. Challenging the systems that are keeping the poor down, we are proclaiming that their needs can be changed someday, but their needs need to be changed now. With the Spirit with us and upon us, we are to name the situations that keep the poor in a subservient position. All captives in this world are not behind bars. There are many people who are captive that walk freely. There is fear in standing boldly. Fear of ending a bad relationship. Fear of not having enough money. Fear of not having shelter. Fear of immigrants breaching this country's borders, and wait for this. The immigrants, they come in, they might get some power, and someday they might actually get to vote. And that's a fear. With God's Spirit upon us, we can release fear and witness to liberate. We can plant light where there's darkness, joy where there's sadness, and we can become people of justice. Through doing undivided witness, we can show today the love of God. Now is the time. What is undivided witness? I'd like to share with you a true story. The state of Oregon, about 6 years ago, commissioned a study to identify the wealthiest school districts of Oregon and the poorest school district in the state of Oregon. The study showed that the wealthiest school district was in the city of Portland, and the study identified that the poorest school district was in the city of Portland. People in the wealthiest school district heard about the study, and the people in the poorest district had never heard of the study. The people in the wealthiest church in the wealthiest school district, when hearing of the study, wanted to do something to improve this high school in the poorest school district. They realized that those students were high risk. 3 women from the church made an appointment with the principal at that poor school and asked him, how can we help? What one thing could we do to help? And the principal answered, you know, when you walked in the front of the school, it's really ugly out there. It would be nice if the front of the school looked like someone cared. The students would feel people cared about them. The woman said they would be back on a Saturday, a month from then, and they'd plant some flowers and they'd plant some shrubs. When they returned, they had 20 people from the church with them. They raked, planted, mulched, and fertilized the plantings. A man from the church owned a painting business, and his workers and he painted the outside of the school. The principal was there, and he had unlocked the school so they could use the bathrooms. It was then that he shared that the bathrooms on the first floor did not work, and people would need to use the second floor bathrooms. Someone quietly called a member of the church who owned a plumbing business. An hour later, the member arrived, and the bathrooms were fixed. And after a long day, everyone went home. Monday morning came, and the students could not believe their eyes. As each student saw the school, their conversation stopped as they individually looked at their school. How did this happen? And who did this? The church wanted to remain anonymous. Several weeks later, the women of the church wanted to do something else, and seeing that fall was fast approaching, they asked the principal if they could bring a few coats by on a Monday morning. He said yes, and they met the principal early one Monday morning, and they brought racks and racks of new coats, scarves, and gloves, enough for each student. When the students walked in the doors of the school, they could not believe what they saw. It was like Christmas, the Christmas they had never had but only dreamed of. Many never had a new coat. Most had never had gloves and a coat and a hat with a scarf all together at the same time. The church had a congregant that was a retired NFL football player, and he always wanted to coach a high school football team. But the opportunity had never come to him, and he asked the principal if he could coach the football team, and the principal said he was thrilled to have a coach. The team's best player skipped several practices, and the coach asked him why. And he said, well, my baby mama, she doesn't want to be a mom anymore. She's moved to New York City, and I'm raising my daughter. The player shared he couldn't always get a sitter, and sometimes needed to drive his daughter to his aunt's house for her to watch his daughter. Only one thing was, he didn't have a car seat, so those were the days he didn't come to practice. The coach told him he would take care of it, and the next day, the coach brought a new car seat. There was another player the coach was worried about, and he was a guy who appeared to be ill. The coach asked him, are you sick? And the player said, no, it's just that I haven't eaten in 2 days. The women's group at the church brought a hot dinner meal every Wednesday for the team to eat. The second Wednesday night, the women noticed the players brought their younger siblings, and they asked, could they eat too? And the answer was, yes, of course they can. The coach mentioned to his former teammates that he was coaching, and early one Saturday morning, a national company who wanted to be anonymous refurbished the football team, and the bleachers, and the field, and uniforms. People said it was Nike, but no one will say for sure. Over the years, they provided a free clothes closet, a girls' night out that gave beauty and dress lessons to teenage girls. They had local beauty salons give free hairstyling and free bottles of shampoo and conditioner to each girl. Once a month, a girls' night was planned. The principal offered an empty classroom for the church to use, and someone was there most all the time to be present to listen to anyone who wanted to stop by. The program is called Be Undivided. Now there are 300,000 churches, aiding 100,000 schools, all because the first church asked, how can we help? How can we help today? Such a faith-filled question. Being people of justice, we say this is our theology, and now is the time.